It's the show where Hawaii's newsmakers come to talk and to take your questions live. From the nation's capital to Honolulu Hale, from the state legislature to the fifth floor. We bring the experts to you and ask them what you want to know. Spotlight Hawaii with Yanji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser.
Hey, happy Monday. Thanks so much for joining us here on Spotlight Hawaii. I'm Yanji Denise, joined by Ryan Kalei-Suji. We hope you had a fantastic Easter weekend, and we are so happy to start your week off here. We are focusing, Ryan, today on hospitality in our state.
That's right. We are catching up with someone who has been on the program a few times to update us firsthand of what they're seeing in Waikiki and beyond. Joining us is Outrigger President and CEO Jeff Wagoner. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You know, we want to talk to a lot of things happening with Outrigger and all the hotels that you manage. We're going to get to some of those details, but we want to just start broadly with what we're seeing with the hospitality industry as a whole here in the state of Hawaii. You've come on this program a few times, especially during the pandemic. We've talked about some of the changes that were happening. Now that we are where we are here in 2023, as we enter into the summer months, what have you been seeing in terms of the numbers, specifically with the Hawaii hotels, and how visitors are coming or not coming to the islands?
Yeah, Ryan, it's a great question. And, when you think about, I'm going to take us all the way back to January and the start of the year as the recovery has started for us. But when you look at January, February, March, when you don't have the spring break or the summer environment, you get a good opportunity to look at demand and what really is the demand for Hawaii and for the islands. And I don't think that we didn't get anywhere near what we thought we would get to in those first few months of the year. And we were not, from an occupancy perspective, back to where we were in 2019. Now, average rate in hotels were up a little bit, so revenues may have been in a pretty good spot, but occupancy was not back. Now, as we get into the spring break environment for the mainland, which we are in right now, or you think about the summer, we are starting to see more robust occupancies for the hotels, but it is very, very short term. I call it white knuckle forecasting when you're looking at the numbers here, because it's all coming in very, very late, but we are seeing some nice occupancies. We anticipate over the summer that we'll be back into the mid 80s from an occupancy perspective. But again, you've got, the entire mainland for the most part not in school. So you've got a lot of family travel that's coming into the market.
I'm interested to know if you think that, the way people travel has changed with COVID. We saw such a unique summer sort of last summer. What are you expecting this year when it comes, is it families? Is it individual travelers? Is it couples? Who is actually still coming to Hawaii?
Yanji, it's a little bit of the same of what we had seen in the past during the pandemic. And when people first started traveling back into Hawaii, I think there was a bit of a different customer that was here. I think rates were a little lower, airline flights were less expensive. And so you had a lot of people who had an opportunity to fly here, flew here and visited the islands. And I think it's getting back into the normal pattern of what we had seen in the past. It's a mixture of couples and families, but the international travel hasn't necessarily gone back to what it was. We're seeing Australia is relatively robust and very close to the 2019 levels, but a lot of the other international destinations are not back yet.
And we want to focus in on that a little bit, specifically with Japan and what has happened with that market. A lot of predictions were made about the Japanese returning this year, still not seeing that. What are you seeing in terms of the Japanese market, knowing that it played such a pivotal role in the past to this hospitality industry in Hawaii?
Ryan, it's a really important part of tourism here in Hawaii. And it's been slower to come back than we all anticipated. I think all of us thought last year that things would start moving much quicker. But if you look at what's happened recently, and I'll throw a couple of stats out there, we look at the amount of, in essence, reservations that were made over the last few weeks into the future. And so what does that percentage look like? So when you went back 4 weeks ago and we were looking at how much Japan business was on the books into the future, it was 37% of 2019. When you look at that number as of yesterday, for us as a company, it's 57. So it's changed in 4 weeks by 20%, 20 percentage points, which is really material. So we are starting to see that travel coming back in a more robust way, but it's still 57% of 2019. Our assumption is it probably doesn't come back completely until we get into mid 2024. But if you go into Japan right now, they're starting to release some of all the restrictions, the majority of them. But I think that it's going to take some more time for us to get back to having 100% of what we had in prior years.
I know that visitors, of course, are cost sensitive. We hear about the possibility of a recession for the mainland U.S. And, we're included in that too, although some economists say we could sidestep that. But how concerned are you about, the cost sensitivity? Especially, I want to ask you that in the context of the proposed green fee. We know that the tourism, sort of the hospitality as a whole, we've heard from Mufi Hanneman on this program, is reluctant to support that. Not that they're not supporting the environment, but just feeling that adding on another fee could be a barrier to entry. What are your feelings about that, given the cost sensitivities that we could be seeing if a recession is coming?
Yunji, I'm not a big fan of the green fee as it's labeled right now. First off, I feel like it's mislabeled. When you think about sustainability and all the things we need to do across our state, I think trying to say that this is a green fee that's going to solve those problems, I think is not necessarily what's going to happen. We here at our company, and I think many of the individuals that I talk to across the industry support impact fees, meaning if someone's going to go into any one of these locations, that there's a fee for them to enter that particular destination, and that money goes back into that destination to take care of maintenance or security or parking lots or keeping it clean. But if we take a green fee and it gets into a general fund, or it gets diluted to the point where you can't do the things you need to do in the destinations that are most frequented, then I think that it's not necessarily a great solution. So the Hanauma Bay model, I think, is the model that we've all looked at over the years. It says that it works. And why not take that model and replicate it in many other destinations or locations? It's important to our industry that tourists are respectful of our state and our trails and all the locations that they may end up in across the state. And we have no issue with our tourists paying for that. But trying to create a green fee that's in essence some type of a license that might get diluted across 20 or 30 or 40 locations and it not be meaningful, I'm not a big fan of. And I also know that it's not going to take care of all the green issues that we really want to go out and tackle. Don't know that it's going to keep plastic bottles out of the ocean, things like that are really important to us from a sustainability perspective. This particular destination management element of paying an impact fee at a location, I think, is a different type of scenario that we're trying to solve for across the state as an industry.
I want to kind of stay on the sustainability topic for a little bit. And we know that Outrigger has done and has initiatives within the company that really focus on just sustainability efforts as a whole. But taking a look, just say at your Waikiki properties, a number of them on the beachfront, you have to deal with an eroding beach line, a constant need to replenish that stuff. I mean, the sand in those areas and that location. With that in mind, I mean, do you believe that there should be something for Waikiki per se to help to offset some of those costs? Because as we look forward, these are going to be issues that will continue when dealing with some of the sustainability issues, including the erosion of beaches.
Yeah, Ryan, I think it goes back a little bit to what I had indicated earlier, is I do think we ought to double down. And this may run counter to what people think might be important, but if we double down on a Waikiki or a Kanapali or a Poipu, and we make sure that it's clean and it's pristine and that the beaches are spectacular and that people want to stay in those resort zones, it's literally going to keep them out of our neighborhoods. And so I think it's really important that we figure out, how do we replenish the beach in Waikiki? We don't want people going off to Kailua and Lanikai and some of these other areas because there's no beach here anymore. So how do we solve for that? How do we make Waikiki this destination that is just spectacular, or Kanapali or Poipu? And let's make sure that we're doing it in a meaningful way that's respectful, but that it's going to make sure that tourism stays in the locations that are designed for tourists.
One of the ways to keep tourists there, obviously, is to make them feel safe. We've talked at length with public safety officials on this program about what they're trying to do in Waikiki. Do you feel like those efforts are bearing fruit? We had Steve Alm on here recently. He said that they are now trying to force some of the folks who are repeat offenders to have a geographical probation, if you will, that they are not allowed into certain zip codes, being, the heart of Waikiki, because they tend to commit more crimes there, and trying to sort of break that pattern. I think he said that there had been, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was 800 arrests. So what are your thoughts about the law enforcement that's happening in that neighborhood?
Yeah, it's great to see the mayor and others really taking some proactive steps here. And we're starting to feel that, which is great. But there's still graffiti, and it happens regularly. There are still issues that are happening on the streets of Waikiki that need to be dealt with over time. And I think, it doesn't happen overnight, but I love that there's policies being put in place and that we're putting more energy behind this. When you look at some of these other resort destinations across the globe that are world-class, or these destinations where people are talking about all the time, they focus very, very heavily on crime and safety and cleanliness, and making sure that there are things to do within those resort districts so that the people who do visit feel safe.
One of the other agencies that, of course, works directly with tourism is the Hawaii Tourism Authority. And we had an article that appeared in the paper today talking about the future and the potential future of the Hawaii Tourism Authority, HTA, moving forward, with some lawmakers saying that there really is no need for this to dissolve HTA. There are a number of other proposals and measures that talk about its future and also its funding moving forward. How do you feel about the Hawaii Tourism Authority? Do you think that this is a necessary agency that the hospitality and visitor industry need? And would you support it moving forward in some capacity?
Yeah, Ryan, I'm not a fan of dissolving HTA. There's a lot of noise out there around this right now. And, we are a big tourist destination, and it is important that there is a robust tourism authority or tourism group that is going to manage what we're doing and how this is happening. And I think it's critically important that a group like HTA remains, and that we don't think that we can go and dissolve HTA and do this kind of on the cheap or in some other way. It just it's not what typical resort destinations do. They typically have a group like HTA that helps manage the destination, that helps manage the marketing for the state, and then they're funded correctly as well. When you think about the funding of HTA, a few years ago, I know they were funded a little over $80 million. The TAT at that point was probably 500 or 600 million at the most that came into the state. Now it's going to be in the range of about 800 million, and they're talking about funding HTA with 30 to 50 million, and it keeps going back and forth. It's got to be funded correctly if we're going to actually have it be effective for us. So with 800 million coming in from our tourism segment in taxes, it just feels like we ought to be able to allocate enough money to be able to manage the HTA environment a little more correctly and with more vigor. So I'm a fan of having an HTA type group around. I want to make sure it's managed well. And I think we've been on a path of trying to get some of this corrected. Some of the chatter and the noise out there did have everybody take a step back and reflect on what should we be doing here. And I think with the current RFP situation that went out for destination management and for marketing was a smart thing to do. And hopefully that will bring us to a place where we'll have a better kind of an HTA management environment as we go forward.
What's interesting, Ryan referred to the article that was in the Honolulu Star-Advertiser this morning, and I just briefly read some of the comments. There is a feeling from some members of the public that Hawaii kind of sells itself, that you don't necessarily need somebody to get the word out, because the word is out and people love Hawaii already. How do you respond to that? Why is the marketing necessary, given that people do know and love Hawaii already?
Well, that is true. I mean, Hawaii is a spectacular location, but you've also got wholesalers who sell into Hawaii. A significant amount of the business for Hawaii comes in through Costco or Pleasant Holidays or Apple Leisure Group. And there's a lot of marketing that happens behind the scenes with all the different individuals that book. The consumer doesn't necessarily pick up the phone and call somebody in Hawaii and book a reservation. There's a lot of different places where you can do that. And when you look at what happens down in Mexico and in the Caribbean and some of these other resort destinations, and they're feeding a lot of money into marketing to those third parties, and then we're silent or vacant and not doing that, it will make a difference, I can assure you. The other thing that's important to me with this is if we are going to lean heavily into Hawaii markets itself, then it needs to be really, really well taken care of. And we've got to go out and make sure our beaches are well taken care of, that it is safe here and it's secure here, and that we don't have graffiti all over our buildings. That is not going to make people feel safe in Hawaii and make it a destination that is coveted.
I think one of the unique perspectives that you bring is that you not only manage the Outrigger properties here in Hawaii, but Outrigger is a global organization that has properties in other countries. When you look at some of your other destinations outside of Hawaii and outside of the U.S., what are some other places and the other destinations that you're at that you think that Hawaii could adopt, whether it be through marketing efforts or just the way that they handle tourism? Is there anything that you're gleaning off of or hearing and seeing in other destinations that you think could benefit Hawaii?
You know, one of the things, one of the areas or locations that I think did a spectacular job was Fiji. We've got 2 properties in Fiji, and when Fiji opened back up, we ended up, our hotels were at about 90% occupancy within 30 days of them reopening. And a lot of that was marketing that they had done directly into Australia and New Zealand. And they did a fabulous job of being able to connect with the customer, to be able to respect the destinations that they were marketing into, and then making sure that they were accepting and that they created an environment where people felt welcome to come back. And it worked. It worked overnight for them. But they did have a very robust marketing strategy to be able to reopen back up that resort destination. When you think about some of the other resort destinations that we're in Thailand and we're in the Maldives. And in Thailand, for example, the 2 largest geo sources of business for that area were Russia and China. And so they didn't have either one of those for quite some time. And so they had to rely on new markets to go out and market into. And so we've got I don't want to draw a complete parallel, but when you've got Japan that's not back like we want, then you've got to figure out how do we go market or communicate to a new consumer in order to be able to bring them here. And that's where strategy matters. And someone like an HTA or HVCB has the ability to step in, understand that dynamic, and to do something about it. So there's a lot of complexity. I used to say to people all the time, people think a hotel is just checking people in and out. There's a lot more to the actual management of a hotel day in and day out. And this whole marketing element of what we're doing for the state, it's not just as easy as Hawaii will market itself. There is complexity to it. There is the ability to want to get to the right consumer. And how do you do that? And when you've got professionals out there doing it, it's going to make a difference for our state.
I want to ask you about some of the workforce challenges. We know that across the board, whether it's the public or the private sector, Hawaii is in a bit of a bind. We don't have the workforce that we had pre-pandemic, and it's definitely showing in certain sectors, perhaps more than others. But I'm interested to know where you're finding the most need in your organization, where you're hiring, if anyone's watching and looking for a job, and how that's playing into how you're able to service the guests.
It's a great point, and we are hiring. So, we'd love to have people come through. I think a lot of the resorts across the state are hiring. Some of our neighbor island resorts we're having a little bit more trouble finding staff in than we are here on Oahu in our Waikiki properties. Food and beverage. I think during the pandemic, a lot of traditional food and beverage employees may have left the islands. And so we're having some difficulty replenishing in that particular area. And I think that's probably the biggest hurdle that we've all seen right now is getting back to having, real high quality food and beverage teams. And so that's important. But when you think about the rest of the workers in a hotel, whether you're a room attendant or bell service, we really were able to fill those positions pretty quickly and hired back or brought back almost every single employee that we had available to come back. I had mentioned at one point during the pandemic, we ended up bringing back 60 people to help us at the Reef as we were going through a renovation. We called 60 people on a Friday, and on Monday, all 60 showed up. And so it's really great to be able to get everybody back to work in our properties that want to come back to work. The bigger issue, I think, from a long-term perspective is we've got a workforce that we've got to be able to replenish in the future as well. And how do we create workforce development across the state to have people know that the industry, the hospitality industry, does have tremendous opportunities? And, you know, myself, for example, you know, I started working in a hotel as a front desk clerk. In a few months, I got promoted to a supervisor, and then an assistant manager, and then a manager, and then a rooms division manager, and flipped over to be a director of sales, and then a resident manager, and then a general manager. There's this hierarchy within a hotel that there are significant opportunities for people. I always say there's a bunch of businesses under one roof too. You've got that front desk operation, you've got a food and beverage operation, you've got a maintenance department, you've got a marketing department, you've got all these different elements of our business that people could step into and create a career out of. So how do we get out there and message correctly that this is a great opportunity for the people of Hawaii to be able to stay in Hawaii and be in fantastic careers?
Wanted to get an update on some of the things that are happening at Outrigger, because we know that there is a lot of movement and a lot of things happening always with all the properties that you manage. How are things looking for just your properties, and any updates that you have specifically about some of the things that are coming for Outrigger?
Well, we've got a lot of exciting things happening. Our property on Kona, we started renovation, spending about $55 million on that property. We started about a week or so ago. It should be done by the end of this year. The Ohana East that's over here on Kahio, we're starting a renovation here. We're going to spend another $55 million here. And for us, it's fantastic to be able to hire locally, to be able to handle these projects and bring people in to put them to work on the construction side is great as well. So we're really excited to start those two projects. Monkey Pod at the Outrigger Reef will be finished within the next 30 to 60 days. We've got an opening timeline that will be announced in a few weeks related to Monkey Pod, so that's exciting. We've got several other projects. We've got another big announcement today coming. Unfortunately, Ryan and Yunji, you know, I love you guys. I really want to be able to communicate it here, but I can't tonight, though. We do have a big announcement on something new that we'll be bringing to Waikiki that we're extremely excited about.
I know you can't tell us what it is, but can you tell us, you know, there were rumblings, titterings in the community that this is pretty major. How major are we talking?
I think it is major. You know, one of the things that we've talked about over time, and you all have heard this as well, is people say we want a customer that's going to spend more money here in Waikiki. And you know, there was discussion about how do you market to those individuals as well. And from my perspective, you know, you've got someone who may save their whole life to come to Hawaii, and we want them here. That's important for them to come here as well. So if we want more money spent in Hawaii, we need to give people something to spend it on. And so I think as we go out and try to identify what is that and what does that look like, this is one of those types of entertainment opportunities that I think will create some tremendous excitement here in Hawaii and specifically in Waikiki.
Well, we'll be looking forward to that announcement. And again, that will be probably coming out a little later this evening, but look forward to hearing that. Before we end, though, you know, just wanted to get your assessment as a whole of tourism in Hawaii. And as we've had these conversations over the past few years with the pandemic and now coming out of that and entering this next chapter, do you ever see Hawaii getting back to the numbers that we were pre-pandemic level? And do you think that's necessary for the tourism industry here to get back to that? Or have we found a higher spender, maybe less visitor kind of a relationship there where we maybe don't need the volume that we had, but more focusing on spending. Overall, what is just your state of where we are with the tourism industry moving forward and what that looks like?
Ryan, I think this is an important topic, and it's important that the industry is very respectful here, and that we're doing things that are taking care of our residents. Our residents are a lot of our employees as well, which are really important. It's important that tourists are educated on Hawaii and how to do things when they're here with us. I think the last couple of years have been a bit of an eye opener for everybody on what does tourism look like, and how do we have tourism make sense as we continue to go forward. One of the things that we all saw is there were no additional hotel rooms built over the last, I don't know how many years, but for a long, long time in Waikiki or in Honolulu, for example. And we had a lot of new visitors. We went from 8 million visitors to 10.4 million visitors. Well, where did they go? They went into our communities. They weren't coming into the hotels. When you looked at what that meant going into the communities, into short-term vacation rentals, that average rate in the short-term vacation rental was cheaper than what it was in a hotel, and they spent less from a food and beverage perspective. So when you take that element away, when you control that environment more, then it was really a mix change that created the spend issue. Now you're seeing spend up, or it appears to be up. Well, part of it is because people aren't going into the short-term vacation rentals, and it's not diluting the average rate when you put it all together. So those types of elements are important, I think, for people to understand, which we've been able to dissect and peel apart and say, let's put this back together. So I don't know that 10.4 million visitors is the right amount of visitors, probably not. But if you're not having people go into our neighborhoods, then we don't have the ability to probably have 10.4 million visitors in the future in Oahu, for example, or in the state. So I think there are things that we all learned out of this that we're all well aware of, and that we're working hard to ensure are thoughtful and that are meaningful as we move forward. And when you think about destination management and the destination management plans that we've created for each island, those are going to be important, that we don't lose track of those, and that we are focused on making sure we're managing the destinations as well as communicating effectively to all of our tourists on how to respect and to make sure that they're doing the right thing when they're here visiting us.
That is definitely something we all want. Thank you so much, Jeff Wagoner from Outrigger Hotel Group. Thank you for being here this morning and sharing all of the data and your wisdom with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Aloha.
Always great to hear from Jeff, and interesting to note the occupancy that he was saying, in the 80% or so, saying that the U.S. market is really what they're drawing on. They continue to draw on that the international market is really not where it needs to be when it comes to the numbers. But also interesting to hear that fluctuation in just 1 month. They went from having, around 30% of the Japanese visitors that they had pre-pandemic, a month later looking into the 50%, so that there are these late bookings, and hopefully from the hotel's perspective, as Japan continues to lower its, COVID regulations and restrictions, that hopefully some of that market comes back. But you heard him say there, they are not expecting it to reach the 2019 levels until 2025.
Yeah, but also recognizing that there may be needs to look at other markets to help offset what is not coming in from Japan. And also to do that, the importance of some sort of governing agency or body like HTA to help manage some of that in with the marketing and making Hawaii a destination in which people will continue to want to travel to when competing with other destinations throughout the world. So the president and CEO of Outrigger are really stating the importance for HTA. This as conversations continue to happen on the legislative level about what that future of this organization looks like, and if it is needed moving forward. We also heard his thoughts about this green fee that lawmakers are also discussing and debating over. You heard from him that he really opposes a broad fee that was initially introduced and proposed by Governor Green, but different variations of that bill now looking to more destination-specific fees or impact fees, as Jeff Wagoner presented, that may be more specific to a location, noting that the Hanauma Bay model is something that they should be looking at rather than an overarching fee that applies to everyone.
Yeah, so we'll see in its current iteration, it looks like it's some kind of a license that applies to roughly 24 sites across the state, and that people would have to renew that on an annual basis. That's something that Jeff Wagner and Mufi Hanneman have both pushed back against, saying that it makes more sense to keep the money basically in-house so that the money for Hanauma Bay stays at Hanauma Bay as opposed to being spread out across the state and across these multiple destinations. Legislature's still working hard on that, and we will see where that winds up. But interesting to see that push-pull there. He also talked about some of the workforce challenges. If you're looking for a job, food and beverage, apparently the place to be. There is a lot of need there, and that they're still working out, how to fully staff the hotels. And that's a challenge, really, Ryan, that we see across the state.
Yeah, we've heard it from many people who have come on this show stating the exact same thing, but also looking forward to that big announcement that he teased a little bit. Wasn't able to get that breaking news here on Spotlight Hawaii, but look forward to hearing the news that comes out of Outrigger Hospitality Group later this evening. He says that they'll be having an event making the official announcement there, and looking forward to hearing what he says could be a game changer in Waikiki, a big deal, a big news and headlines that we'll be looking forward to hearing.
Yeah, also the group as a whole making a lot of big investments in renovations, over $50 million for 2 different hotel properties that they're looking to make big renovations to. And that, of course, creates a lot of job and has an impact there. We did get a little tease on what this announcement will be, something about entertainment. I don't know what it is, but I will be watching Kanikapila Grill turns 15. And so they are celebrating that this evening. And we expect that the announcement will come there. So always great to hear from Jeff Wagner. Another person who has a big stake in the tourism industry, of course, is Kauai Mayor Derek Kawakami. You saw him have some of the strictest COVID regulations during the height of the pandemic. How is he managing tourism on his island, plus all of the other challenges? He gave his state of the county address recently, talked a lot about the investment in infrastructure and what the county is doing when it comes to climate. So we'll be catching up with him on Wednesday right here at 10:30.
We'll see you then. Aloha.